So, hi everyone. Hi Omar, everyone from the community across the region. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to anyone, wherever you are. Definitely, you're carrying our region wherever you go. And we would like to start, first of all, to thank you for joining our session at Bread and Net. This session that is entitled Social Media Can Take You to Jail, the State of Online Freedom in Tunisia, Lebanon and Jordan. Here to listen with you all to some experts from our region talking about the state of online freedom in our countries, and also to talk about the existing laws and the patterns that we observed and similarities between these countries that we observed through the Muhal Project. It's a project led by SMAX and run in both, actually, in Tunisia, Lebanon, and Jordan. Today, I'll be joined by Wiem Melki. Wiem is a researcher, communications consultant in Tunisia, and she has been working with nonprofits for the last 9 years on many projects related to youth, human rights, gender, governance, transparency. She also contributed to research regarding politics and online hate speech in the MENA region, as well as essays within the Memories of a Pandemic. It's a book that was released recently. VM has a BA in linguistic and MPA from the University of Birmingham. Along with VM, we have Omar Daouk from Lebanon. He is a Lebanese project coordinator for Muhal and a legal researcher at SMAX. Omar is currently based in Paris and pursuing his master's degree in digital rights at the prestigious Sorbonne. He's so passionate about the interaction between law and technology. And later on, also, we will have Raya Sharbain, who works with JOSA. JOSA is the Jordanian or Jordan Open Source Association. It's a civil society organization based in Amman and works to defend and advocate for the rights of Jordanians on the internet. Now we start with the floor is yours.
So hello everyone. So I will be giving some insights about the research that we have been doing in Tunisia for the last 6 months, let's say. So basically we have been evaluating the status of online freedom of expression in Tunisia after the revolution, including with the recent event that has been happening in the country. We interviewed activists, we interviewed defendants, lawyers, judges, in order to have like a holistic understanding of what is happening with online freedom of speech. Everybody knows that we had a revolution. People were free to express themselves, whether online or offline, but still we are still struggling. And with all the political instability happening, there are a lot of threats. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, now we can.
Okay. So we have been witnessing a lot of shrinking in terms of, freedom of speech online. A lot of people are not feeling safe to express their opinions because of all the harassment that has been going on against, civil rights activists, bloggers, politicians, even MPs have been targeted. So we can say that after the revolution, and especially in the recent years with all the instability happening, we moved from like a police state to an online police state in a way, with a lot of, online like surveillance, police, and especially with the creation of police unions, there has been a lot of, harassment online by police security forces against, voices who are criticizing, whether on the local level or on the national level. We have been having like cases, like military court cases against civilians, which is a really like a big danger for the freedom of expression in Tunisia and for the democratic transition especially. So I will start with going with the legal framework. So as many of you know, the constitution that Tunisia had after the revolution guaranteed freedom of expression, and the Article 31. We had also another article about freedom of the media. We also had some reforms in the Code of Telecommunication in 2016, which also kind of emphasized the freedom of the media. But still, we have a penal code that's still going on, and it has been used against a lot of online voices, a lot of whom has been in prison. They have been harassed. They have been questioned for their opinions that they post on social media, and especially Facebook for the Tunisian case. Most of the cases that we identified are on Facebook. So people posting pictures criticizing the government or the president or different, government officials, or resharing opinions on Facebook, posting their, analysis on Facebook. They go to the police stations to be questioned about those Facebook posts. They go to courts. Some people were present for those opinions. And another dangerous thing that has been happening in Tunisia is that some of the cases include private conversations on social media. In the police report, you would find screenshots of private conversations or Facebook group conversations, which is really threatening, which shows how much the police has been interfering in people's private lives, using platforms for social networking to surveil criticism online. And as I mentioned, the code, we have a lot of articles defamation, related to defamation or related to criticism of public officials or the president. For example, I can enumerate the Article 67, Article 125, Article 128, 245 and 247. We have also the Telecommunication Code, which has some articles that are punitive in a way and can get you to prison against journalists. We also have the Military Code, which also has an article against civilians who kind of criticize the military, and they can go to court because of that. And this is from the term of the legal framework in a way. And there's another threat regarding the judicial procedures. So once these people are, asked to come to the police during the trials, there are a lot of infringements. So we don't really have fair trials against defendants. It's not supposed to happen. People are not supposed to go to jail for their opinions, but still this happens. And during these procedures, there are a lot of infringements. For example, these people, so there are some, instead of being informed officially, for example, by a letter from the police or something, these people are arrested randomly. They can be going in the streets and they suddenly get arrested. They don't know what's happening. They're not even told what is their crime until a few days, which gets us to other infringements like the days of arrest. So in the law, people should be arrested at maximum for 24 hours, but still a lot of people they stay in jail for days without even knowing what is their crime. And then they realize it was about their opinions on Facebook. Also, the police reports, there are a lot of falsifications and a lot of harassment. So defendants are being pushed to say certain things under threat or under torture, under intimidation, especially when we look at the local, in certain regions where the police are very strong. And the defendant will find themselves in a weak position, and in certain pressure that they would agree to whatever has been said. And when these reports go to court, the judges are not questioning them most of the time. So they basically blindly, if we can say that, agree to whatever the reports would entail, and again kind of contribute in the in these unfair trials through not questioning like whatever happens in the reports. Other things is some people have been asked to write commitments not to post on social media against certain defendants in exchange of their release, which is also very dangerous. Also harassment online and offline, even when the person goes back home, they're still getting harassed, by the police or by other fake profiles, kind of, attacking them, sending private messages, like harassing them in the comment section, so to whatever post they would post. And then this in a way kind of impacted a lot of defendants in a way. Many of them, they stopped basically sharing their opinions online because of all the harassment they has been through. Some of them, they continue, to be honest. Some of them are still very active online. They're still, some of them, like, they have many cases going on, and still they are very, vocal about their opinions. They're not afraid. Also, in terms of the regions, as I mentioned, sometimes it's more sensitive, especially for women defendants. And it happened that some women local activists that have been very vocal about their opinions, criticizing like local governors, or if there are any corruptions, they're trying to kind of share information about it. But after being harassed in a way, they just stopped. And for women in certain regions, to be asked to go to police station or to be questioned, this kind of puts the reputation of the family in question, her reputation. So this kind of led also to self-censorship in many, many cases. So all of these infringements kind of negatively impact the freedom of expression in Tunisia. So we have a lot of voices that could be heard, that could be, especially on the local level, they could be, an instigator for change in certain corruption cases. Because what's happening is not all of the cases are related to politics. Some cases are related to corruption, like for certain private companies or certain practices of a local governor in the region. And then so by these practices, we are really missing a huge part of the accountability part of democracy in Tunisia. So people are afraid to share their opinions, to criticize, because they might go to jail because of that. So we are kind of missing a huge part of the accountability part. A lot of people also, they just gave up because of all the harassment they have been through. They prefer to step away from politics and from the local engagement in a way, especially after as I mentioned, the continuous intimidation, whether pre, if you can say, trials or pre-arrests, and also after. This continues even after, so that they make sure this person will never post again about these issues. And this takes us to some of the themes that we found, because the street kind of blurs with the online sphere, because a lot of these activists are they are engaged in protests on the streets, but they are very vocal online. And that we had a lot of cases where people who got arrested in the streets during protests, or even sometimes any day, a random day, they would get arrested for other crimes, like for example, we have an article that kind of protects public officials. So you would get arrested for insulting, for example, a public official in the streets that has to do nothing with your opinions online. But these people are identified already. And this also happened to LGBT communities. We had interviews with some of their activists, and they have been, other than the online harassments and all the pressure they have been going through, they have been arrested in the streets for other crimes, like I mentioned, insulting a public official. But this is because of what they are. This is because of what they are posting. This is because of their kind of online activism. So people are being arrested outside for other crimes, but it's because they are active online. It's because they are very vocal about their opinions. They are very sharp. They criticize. So there's kind of a blurry line. It's true that it's not a direct, it's not a direct consequence of their public opinions, but we have noticed this trend a lot, which is also part of our report, like how the street kind of blurred with the online sphere. So people are not safe on the online sphere, and they are not also safe in the offline sphere in a way. So as I mentioned, a lot of people didn't feel safe to post their opinions. We also, COVID played a role, with all the lockdowns happening, with the state kind of taking control of the country, and with the excuse of, containing the virus, containing people inside. This kind of also put a pressure on people and gave more prerogatives to the police in a way. And a lot of people there were also cases of people that were arrested because they kind of broke the lockdown hours, but it was, these people are known to be very local activists in their neighborhoods, and especially that there's no so the arrests are really random. Like some people you can go outside after the lockdown hours and not get arrested, and some other people, they get arrested, especially the active ones. So you can feel that there is no consistency at all in all these arrests. So it's really random and arbitrary arrests. There is no and also, especially in the regions, there are many cases that we have not been hearing about. So in the capital, some people are backed by NGOs. They have friends there. They have a network that can defend them and mobilize behind them. But in the local regions, sometimes there are cases we don't even hear about, and they get arrested. They are forced to sign commitments, and nobody hears about them because nobody mobilized against them. And this also creates an issue with civil society and its mobilization. How consistent are we defending people that we know, backing people that we know? How much effort are we doing to try to go to the regions or to monitor what's happening in the regions? How are we working together? And this brings us to another issue, that even the mobilization of civil society is to release or to free that person, but not to reform the laws. So that's why whenever someone gets arrested, all the mobilization focuses on their release, but there are no, if we can say, strong mobilization against these laws. People should not be arrested for their opinions. So the mobilization of civil society needs to be more consistent. People need to work together more, like lawyers and civil society activists, also judges. Why not? Because they are part of this, if you can say, of this circle, a vicious circle, if you can say. And the mobilization should be in order to reform the laws, these laws, not just to, yes, we need to release that person because it was not fair. They should not be jailed for their opinion, but also these laws need to be changed, which, again, another issue when we talk about civil society mobilization in Tunisia. It's very active. When I talked with some of the organizations, they also said it's very tiring for them. All these cases, especially in certain periods, we have many cases happening in many places. So it is even physically tiring and emotionally draining for them to monitor and track every case and to follow up with it, because we have a big issue as well following up So there is a case, there is a controversy for a few days, people calling for their release, and then it goes, and then a few days later, there's a new case or there is a new issue in Tunisia that people will talk about. So there is no follow-up. And this is what makes our report and Muhal Project very important, because we kind of document the cases, whether the open ones or the closed ones, which is a problem. Even when we talked with civil society, some of them, they didn't know what happened with some of the defendants, for example. They mobilized for their release, but they are not sure if their case is closed, if they are still in prison, if they are out. So it's very key to have the Muhal platform in order to see all the cases that have been happening, in order to track, if there are cases that are still open, why are they still open? If there are people still in jail, we need to mobilize to free these people. And also another issue is that these trials of freedoms of expression are taking too long. Even before COVID, it was taking too long already. And the excuse of some of the juries is that, okay, we have many cases going on. And COVID, it was even worse, because, the workload of, the courts becomes, heavier. So these cases are not a priority anymore. So we have people that have been, let's say, they have a case 3 years, 4 years ago, and they still don't know what's going to happen, or when is their next trial happening. Trials keep being postponed. So there's also this issue. And another interesting thing is that when we talk about freedom of expression online, some parties kind of use that, especially during elections or certain political instabilities happening. Some political parties or some politicians use that right in order to contribute in slandering campaigns, or defamation campaigns against their oppositions or opponents. And when some of their, these people get arrested or get questioned about their opinions on social media, they say, oh, this is online freedom of expression. So there is also this, and this is why sometimes some people justify these, trials and these arrests, because they say, oh no, because these people are doing it on purpose, it's for political, there's a political, if we can say, there are political intentions behind it. They're not as innocent, they're not just for criticizing the government or these politicians. There is an agenda behind that. So there is that also.
Yeah, what about the recommendations from Tunisia?
So in terms of the recommendations,
and we will, after the recommendations, we will have to go to Omar. So briefly.
Yeah. So in terms of recommendation, again, legal reforms are important, especially with the penal codes. People should not go to jail because of their online or offline opinions, actually. So civil society need to mobilize more in this respect to modify these, these transgressions, if we can say. In terms of judicial procedures, all the steps need to be respected. Like the people need to be informed officially. The days of arrest should be respected. People should be able to call a lawyer. Because it happened many times that people were not informed of their right to have a lawyer, and then they get carried away with whatever the police would say. So we need to implement the correct judicial procedures by the time until we modify the laws. Bearing in mind the status we have now, we need to at least respect the judicial procedures. Also, the mobilization against the trials of civilians in military courts, this should end, and civil society and politicians should continue to try to kind of limit these trials and stop them, because civilians should not be tried in military courts. This should be, something. It's detrimental in this democratic transition. Also, more monitoring in the regions from civil society or even the lawyers, because a lot of local voices are not protected, they are not safe, they need assistance. So we need to focus on the regions as well. Also, some of our interviewees recommended that even bloggers and civil society activists, bearing in mind the legal framework that we have, they need to be careful while posting, so that they are not targeted easily by, or like they are not an easy target by the police or by the public prosecutor. Especially they are very important for for the accountability aspect of the democratic transition. So these are the main recommendations based on our reports. So yeah, I think that we have a long way. It's true, we are seen in the MENA region as beacon of hope, but when you look inside, and especially with all the political instability we are still facing, we need to be very vigilant as researchers, civil society activists, politicians, lawyers. We need to be very vigilant to continue the fight against the comeback of these authoritarian practices.
All right. Thanks, Wiem. I think we lost Emna for a second there. So since it's my turn, I'm just going to take over for now, whilst Emna manages to connect again. So I will be speaking about. Hi, everyone. I mean, can you all hear me properly? Is it working? Okay. I will be speaking about Muhal in Lebanon. As Emna mentioned earlier, Muhal is a project that was first implemented and created in Lebanon by SMAX, and it's mainly to monitor freedom of expression online. So we are an observatory for freedom of expression online. I will be focusing more on this year, on the year 2021. For Muhal, as we have previously discussed during previous Nuts, Muhal and freedom of expression online during these respective years. So I will be focusing on the 2021 year for Muhal. It would be interesting to say that since Muhal was created, the need for Muhal was created was that generally cases of summons for freedom of expression, especially online, have increased since 2015, approximately since 2016, I would say. They've been increasing, rapidly increasing, and that has been happening with also an increase in the revolutions and protests everywhere. The more and more we saw people protesting on the streets, the more people took to social media to express how they felt towards their government, and that kind of exploded during the October 17th revolution, when people were just unsatisfied with the way the government was handling the country, when we started falling into an economic collapse or crisis. Lebanon is now facing absolute political and economical uncertainty, which really puts all its residents on the edge all the time. So people needed to go to social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, sometimes Instagram even, just to express if they are unhappy about something or about the handling of the government, of all these crises that have been happening. We can also mark the August 4th explosion after that, and that happened in Beirut in 2020. And after that, even we didn't see a decrease in summons when people were expressing their anger towards what was happening in the country. So mainly what's happening is that the more and more we notice that people are expressing themselves online, the more, and we noticed that the government, under the Cybercrime Investigation Bureau, which is the authority responsible for summoning people whether they post something online or something like that, we noticed that the Cybercrime Bureau is constantly summoning people over something they said, over an opinion they gave, whether or not it's they consider it to be insulting or not. So what they do is they summon these people and they force them to sign a pledge that has no legal right, no constitutional right. What it is a violation towards their human rights, because what it consists of them signing a pledge to trying to say that they're never gonna express these opinions, or they're gonna refrain from making further comments or similar comments, such as the ones they were summoned for. And this pledge by itself kind of constitutes a violation of their freedom of expression generally, because we can't really force people not to express what they have in mind, as long as they're doing it respectively. So these complaints are usually filed by the political parties or the state security, who do it, who ask the Cybercrime Investigation Bureau to do it, and then that's the authority that does it. And most of these cases actually stay open. I mean, generally what happens is that they go to the Cybercrime Investigation Bureau. They're mainly forced or intimidated not to sign the pledge. So they do that, and then when they leave, the case remains open, which also poses a risk for these people, because at any given moment they can be summoned again, or the case can actually go to court, which would be very serious for the people who are summoned, because then they would need judicial representation, and it will take a toll on most people, which will discourage most people to express themselves online, because then they would have to face all of these legal and judicial procedures that they do not have to face in the first place. It would be interesting to say as well that in Lebanon we don't have a law. I mean, all of these summons are not made based on articles of the law that are very specific to online freedom of expression. They're just articles related to freedom of expression. They're old previous articles that the government is using, that political parties and state security are using to summon people and to silence these people. But they're not really articles that reflect online freedom of expression generally. That they're not. I mean, the most important ones and the most used ones are slander and libel, which are articles from the criminal code, from the Lebanese criminal code. They're articles, I think, 582 and 584 of the criminal code. And then you have Article 384 of the criminal code of the same code, which talks about insulting the president of the republic. So that is, I think, the second most used charge when people are summoned. So we notice that there is a pattern where whenever someone is criticizing the government or the presidency or the office, we have articles of the law that are being used just to silence these voices. They're not articles that are very specific, but they're the ones that are being used. The people who are mostly targeted for these with these summons are activists and journalists, because then when you target an activist, these activists generally have a big following, and when people notice that an activist or a journalist, someone who has a big following, is being summoned over something they said, they would be less encouraged to, or even more discouraged to express their voices online. That is generally the case. That being said, we do have a lot of people who do not have a following and who just sometimes just express their opinions online, and this causes a problem when these people are summoned, because as Wiem said, when someone has a large following, or when someone can gather civil society very quickly, releasing this person is much easier than having someone who doesn't have a large following, when sometimes we have cases where someone is locked up for about a week before anyone knows about their arrest or their summon, because they didn't really have anyone who knew about their summon, or maybe anyone who knew what they said. And most of the times, nobody knows why they're being summoned exactly. They just call them, or they send them a message telling them that you have to come to the investigation bureau. And then when they go, they find out what their charges are, why they are being summoned, or even which post they're being summoned for. So this causes a problem for most people who don't have a large following. We can also say that with all of this happening this year, 2021, I think there has been a slight decrease in summons from people, but it's still an increase since 2015. We still have people who are being summoned. We still have activists who are trying to be silent. Even sometimes we have stand-up comedians who are being, people who are trying to just adjust and who are trying to make sense of everything that is happening in the country, everything of the whole situation in the country. We have these people who are trying to silence these voices, and now we have a new government in Lebanon, and I think that from what we heard so far, there doesn't seem to be any willingness to try to properly regulate this online space. We seem to have a lot of ministers who are still willing to summon people over something they said, or we even have the new Minister of Information, who in his first declaration, I think, he urged activists and journalists not to insult anyone, or to be professional and commit to ethics, to their professional ethics, and that he wouldn't hesitate to go to the judicial system in order to protect people's dignities, as he phrased it. So that's kind of a blow in that sense. That kind of lets us know how the situation is going to be moving forward. Okay, I will be mindful of the time because it's 11:40 now, 12:40 now in Beirut time. So to leave room for Raya to also give her insight, I would just like to say that the Lebanese freedom of expression, the online Lebanese freedom of expression space has to be protected. We need to create laws and regulations that are more specific. We need to have codes that are specific to the online space, where people could properly, where they can even know how to behave in such spaces, where they can know what constitutes a violation of the law. We need to update the previous freedom of expression articles, because they are very old and they're not updated. and they're just generally used right now just to silence people. But most importantly, I think to protect freedom of expression online, we need to have, the Lebanese people need to have access to basic things such as electricity and internet, because in Lebanon right now, a lot of people don't have that. And that itself is a restriction on Lebanese voices, on Lebanese people, because most people barely have electricity during the day. And that's in big cities, and in rural areas, it's much more difficult to have access to these things now. And that really puts a lot of restrictions on online freedom of expression, and on people in general. I just wanted to add that if anyone wanted to know anything more about Muhal, since I'm here representing SMAX as well, there will be a booth for Muhal. It's with my colleague Mariam Shafi'i, and anyone who has any questions, wants to know anything extra about Muhal, can go to the booth and ask there. And now I leave the floor for Emna and Raya.
Thank you so much, Omar. And sorry for the internet disruption. Thank you for both Wiem and Omar. This is very, very insightful. Because as long as we know that Tunisia is a democracy, nobody really cares about what's happening online. And in reality, no, there is a lot of happening. It's a fragile democracy, and we've seen that, and especially after July 25th. And what's happening in Lebanon is absolutely something that we should use many platforms such as Bread and Net to talk about. Now we move to Raya from Joseph to talk about what's actually happening in Jordan. And we know that there are a lot of things, similarities to what we listened to from Omar and Wiem, but also other cases. The floor is yours, Raya.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate Bread and Not giving us the platform to talk about an issue as important as this. I mean, in Jordan, we're not as unique. We like to be a copycats, I guess, in terms of the legal frameworks we use. We follow a similar regional pattern in how our laws incriminate freedom of expression generally, but also how it particularly touches upon the online space. What we're seeing is that the red lines of speech are blurring increasingly. We have a folder of laws that are used against people, journalists, human rights defenders. And I guess I'll highlight just a few for today's session, particularly the ones that are used the most against people who express their opinions and just voice themselves online. So we have a cybercrime law. I've seen this in other countries in the region. Sometimes it's called I guess the informatics law, I'm not sure. I know the names in Arabic, but particularly in Jordan, since this law was introduced in Article 11, which incriminates slander or libel or insult, we've seen thousands of cases of people being charged against Article 11. We have the Penal Code as well, which incriminates slander as well, but also incriminates slander against an official body. It could be a ministry, it could be a minister. And we have also, under the Penal Code, other articles that incriminate, for example, incitements to protest. So if I were to post something on Facebook saying, Yalla, let's go to protest in the Fourth Circle where the Prime Ministry is, I could be charged against, and we've seen cases of people charged against this specific article. In Jordan, since we're a kingdom, we do have under the law, lèse majesté is incriminated against. So speaking or let's say insulting the royal family or members of the royal family. And I'll talk more about this more specifically, lèse majesté. And we see other rare cases, for example, people charged against anti-terrorism laws. So if they were, for example, one famous case was last year, the Jordanian and Palestinian caricaturist Imad Hajjaj posted a caricature where he condemned the normalization deal between the occupation and one of the Gulf countries. And so he was charged for inciting, let's say, strife against a regional country, or a country that is sister to Jordan, I guess. And that is a very, very serious charge. It was eventually dropped. Okay. So another thing, since it's COVID, Jordan, since March 2020, put in place something called the defense law. So it gives the prime minister so the prime minister broad powers to put forward defense orders without seeking approval from other members of the government or parliament even. So one of the defense laws tackles, so in ambiguous terms, tackles the spread of misinformation. So, and also tackles any form of, let's say, assembly. So we've seen some cases of people being charged against these specific defense orders. And may I note that in Jordan, we are under a defense law until we don't know when. There's no expiry date for this defense law. So at JOSA, since we're a digital rights organization, we monitor the legal framework and the changes suggested on the legal framework that touch upon digital rights, including online freedom of expression. But since we joined Muhal in 2020, we started mapping the detentions of people on the basis of on the basis of online expression. And so according to the National Center for Human Rights, in 2020 alone, there were 2,140 cases registered in violation of Article 11 of the cybercrime law. And there were 402 cases of slander against an official body, which is the case I was talking about in the penal code. But what's happening in 2021? Definitely things are changing. We're seeing detentions, we're seeing people being called in for Facebook posts, asked to take down what they wrote. One of the most recent cases is that of Kamel Zarbi, who wrote a post on Facebook asking or inquiring whether where the Prime Minister's wife's salary comes from. That was his post. He was detained immediately. He faced administrative detention because the Prime Minister himself filed charges against Kamel. And last week, and this is following great uproar, the Prime Minister dropped the charges, but it left the case now to the case is now left to the public prosecutor. What we're seeing as well more and more, you've probably heard in Jordan of a few cases that have reached international media, the dissolution of or like the closing down of the teachers union, the dissolution of its board members, the case of Prince Hamza. In all of these cases, what we're seeing is that their gag orders are put in place. So people are not allowed to comment on what's happening or even exchange news about it. The thing is, because of this culture of repression and intimidation, even journalists themselves fear posting or even writing and investigating about these matters. Let's talk about the teachers union specifically, because in 2021, when we were doing the Muhal research, we saw a lot of cases related to the teachers union. So back in 2020, the Jordanian government closed down the teachers union forcibly, which is the biggest and largest democratic representation in Jordan, with over, I guess, 200,000 members, and dissolved its board. In 2020, people continued to post about it in support of the teachers union and all teachers. We've seen a great number of people being detained, charged, and imprisoned just and simply for expressing their opinion on that case, or even calling for a protest, saying we want to go do like a masira, a walk towards, for example, one of the union buildings, calling for a protest. They're being detained for that, or even expressions of solidarity. Like one example from this year is a teacher called Layla. she posted on Facebook showing solidarity with one of the detained teachers. One of the teachers was detained and was on hunger strike. So Layla wrote a post in solidarity, and suddenly she found herself with a case under the cybercrime law. So I say all this. It's frightening, but since I'm the last speaker, I will dare and express some cautious optimism, at least for Jordan's case. So in August, proposed certain social media regulations to try and make it very difficult for people to go on live stream, or at least news outlets, to make it, they would require very expensive licenses and so on. The good thing is that these regulations are now put in a virtual paper shredder. So people spoke out against it, said this is a broad violation of freedom of expression, and so these regulations currently are not proposed anymore, and that's a great thing. The new state minister for media or government spokesperson, Faisal Shboul, has expressed the government's intention to revisit the cybercrime law, and specifically Article 11. And currently the intention is probably to lighten the penalties, because currently you can be imprisoned if you're charged under the Article 11 of the cybercrime law, which is good. I mean, Josa's recommendation, repeal the law. But if the government wants to revisit it for the sake of respecting certain human rights, that's definitely something we can encourage. More recently, actually, also, there was an important decision that was made in the Court of Cassation, or Jordan's Supreme Court. So the court ruled that a personal right must be taken in order for the defendant to be prosecuted in accordance with Article 11 of the cybercrime law. So that means that the public prosecutor, so if other courts follow it, this decision, if there's a precedence that is set, this will mark an important step in limiting the number of cases we get under Article 11, because then security agencies and government agencies cannot move forward and claim a personal right and bring a case forward to court. So there needs to be basically a private citizen filing a claim against another private citizen. So some other good news, and also and perhaps also in the context of a few scandals that have been happening, the king did order the government to review all cases of lèse-majesté, and a week ago there was a special pardon that was issued on, I think, more than 195 cases. A special pardon, not a public pardon. Again, not a bad thing. It's progress, towards the better. But I guess I'll leave with that. So as civil society, I think we tend to view, especially civil society that works in digital rights, we tend to view these limitations on online expressions a bit in silo. But we have to start dissecting this anatomy of silence a bit more, the intimidation tactics, the mass surveillance, the censorship that's happening, and especially in Jordan, what we're seeing, the growing culture of self-censorship. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Raya. Absolutely right. Enough silence. We have to be vocal. We have all of us to stand together. Being cautious of time, we know that there are a few questions from the audience. One of the questions is, how can we document cases of normal people? I think that's the Muhal platform, and it's not only the cases that were discussed today were not only of activists or journalists, but also normal people who were vocal and tried to use the online platforms for their questions. In countries like Tunisia, where the freedom of expression is legal, we still face that. And I guess it's the case of everywhere, like we saw. There's another question of how can these cases be documented, cases documented help in the drafting of new laws. And I think that was responded by Raya right now when she mentioned the small big victory of Joza while documenting the cases. It's very important. And thank you so much, Raya, for pointing that one. Another question is how to streamline outreach to document all violations regardless of label. Is there any one of our speakers would like to respond to this? Anyone? We still have a couple of minutes.
Could you just repeat the question?
How to streamline outreach to document all violations regardless of the label. And if you don't feel like you can respond to the question right now, it's fine. We still have the chat room and room number 1, so we can basically respond over there.
I guess,
Yes.
sorry, go ahead, Omar, if you
No,
want.
sorry, go.
I wanted to say that Muhal as a platform, so muhal.org tries to also streamline this documentation, is to have it all in one place and also searchable and searchable by country as well. So that is something that is, I guess, a good, it's an excellent platform to start documenting these cases. And I would love for Muhal to have more data visualization and seeing how cases grow in the years and so on.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for saying that. That's what I wanted to say. And I wanted to say that Muhal generally is a platform used for documenting digital rights freedom of expression violations. So this is the purpose that it's being used for right now. I mean, we can also, if you want it to be regardless of label, we can also use create platforms such as Muhal to have them all gathered in one place, to have each kind of violation gathered in one place. So this could all be a good idea. We could always need more documentation of violations in general, violations of human rights in general. So that would be very important, I think.
Thank you so much for both of you, for the 3 of you actually today. And one just last reminder, Muhal website is muhal.org, muhal.org. The session comes to an end. Thanks to everyone who watched us today. Thank you for your questions. And we're sorry if we did not pick some of those questions. Enjoy the rest of this conference and hopefully we meet in real life soon.
Enjoy, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good bread and nuts.
Bye-bye.
Have a good bread and nut. Bye.